finding us here again at WNST and, of course, on our Facebook Live as well as on YouTube and our WNSTV channel. My wife and I are back from Germany. Hundreds of thousands of views and likes and comments and tears and all that good stuff. I do appreciate it. And tell you what, getting back into the groove here. It's been a little while since I talked to this guy. And But I was sitting in Dom Cathedral in Cologne, Germany, or Köln, Deutschland, as they say, and his name was widely spotted on a share of a Tom Lavero, as we would say in the old journalism biz, takedown of Peter G. Angelo's based on the lack of Oriole attendance that Marty Conway and I have been the only media members chronicling, and, we care a little bit. He is the good professor from Georgetown University. He is one of the longtime Oriole as well as Texas Ranger executives in the 1980s and 90s, back when we were young men, correct, Professor Conway?
That's right. We were both very young men, for sure.
Well, I was a much younger man at that point.
Yeah.
I used to say to Jack Gibbons, who was my boss and one of my mentors, I remember this very vividly. I was a very young guy. I said to Jack, why would anybody care about the business of sports? I mean, who reads that stuff? And, now as I get a little older and you see the stadium fill up and then empty out and the city empty out as it did last week, there are some journalists left out there. Tom Lavero wrote a piece, and I know you and I have talked about this. And, why don't you just give me your perspective on it? Because I guess Tommy Love called you, and you've known Tom as long as I've known Tom, probably 30 years. And, he's trying to find reasons, as a couple of radio hosts did last week, and calling me from Toronto, from Ottawa, from Philadelphia to put me on their radio show to say, why all the empty seats in Baltimore? I thought they liked baseball in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess to put it in perspective, why does it matter? It's pretty simple. This is what was articulated to me fairly early in my career as a baseball executive on the business side, and that is that there are two things widely reported. That's why they have it a box score. One is the score line of the game, and the other is the attendance. Now, yes, do they put the weather and the time, all that. But the two most important signatures from any event, frankly, and particularly in baseball, is the line score and the attendance. So if those are two metrics by which they're going to be published after every game, then those are two metrics by which people who maybe not be following you on a daily or weekly basis are going to assess very quickly in a snap way how well you're doing, your standings, how well the game went, and then how many people showed up. So if that's the case, then you really should be paying careful attention and doing everything you can to win both of those outcomes, to win the game and to win on the attendance line. So why is it important? I think it's simple as that the media reports it as a matter of course for every game or every major sports event that we have, whether it's the Super Bowl all the way down to a baseball game on, Monday, April 24th or whatever.
Marty, were you with the team in 79? I don't want to date you too much or how old you were, but in the summer of 79, it was a very special year for me and my dad. I've written about it. I went to 31 Oriole games that year before they lost. And, I was 10 years old, almost 11 years old, going into middle school. And I remember every night knowing the attendance number. Literally, my dad would listen for it in the 6th inning or 7th inning because there was like some sort of civic pride my father had that I think some of us had that maybe I began my career with by saying, good sports towns sell out and they owe it to the team to show up and all that. I got to tell you, it's my 25th year in doing this. I don't think Baltimore or the fans owe Peter G. Angelos or the franchise or the laundry jack squat. I don't think it's my civic obligation to support the baseball team and give them money. And I think in the modern era, there are far more people that feel that way about it, like me, and certainly the state of California and what they've been through in building stadia, as well as in other places like you trying to get this stadium built. And I know you were a huge part of that, and you don't brag about that or pat yourself on the back, but you were in the inner circle of Everett Bennett Williams and Larry Lucchino when all the blueprints were coming in, and you were the guy trying to sell the donuts, as they like to say back in the 80s, because that was your job. And selling tickets was a huge part of your pride. You saw part of that come and go. And that's why I mentioned 79, because it wasn't lost on me that on Tankard night when the Rangers were in town, that 38,000 people would be there, and my dad and I would have to get lower general admission reserve. They had reserve general admission tickets, which is some sort of oxymoron, but when the Yankees and the Red Sox came in 79, 83, I know you remember that era, that there really was a push to represent and show up for Baltimore pride. That's kind of gone out the window, and last week was a real clear representation of, like, where the community is, and I'm inking a blog this week that, like the movie, Baltimore's just not into you, Orioles. I don't know why. I do know why, and I write why, and you know why, and you've opined why, and that's part of what Tommy Love got to last week in the Washington Times. But, there really is sort of a civic pride issue that's kind of been flushed down the toilet in this quarter of a century that I feel being very close to the fire here.
Well, from a business perspective, the attendance number, whether it's on a nightly basis or for the full season or whatever you want to call it, is a measurement of the club's baseball, football, or the event, race, whatever you want to call it. It's a measurement of the organization's engagement with the community. It's as simple as that, right? And that's really what it is.
Are we worth your time and your money, right? I mean, that's the question. When Springsteen comes to town, if the show's soft, people didn't even feel like coming or paying for it again, right?
It's a barometer or a thermometer, however you want to look at it, as a measurement tool of the relationship between that event, that organization, that team, whatever it is, and their local community, which is why organizations put so much time and effort, staff-wise and everything else, into selling season tickets and group sales and all the different things that I took you through last time that are the building blocks to what that number shows you on any given night. And it's a foregone conclusion that in the industry, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and sometimes even Thursday are likely to be some of your lower attended nights because you don't typically have a lot of the other gimmicks and things on top of those. Having said that, you're referencing a time in Baltimore, which is right prior to me, but not that long, where the Orioles and Edward Bennett Williams, and I'll say this about Edward Bennett Williams, he does have a recognition in the plaza outside of the ballpark. But this is a person who was a lifelong Washington resident who allowed the team to go to a year-to-year lease, which made the team very attractive from the outside. And there were suitors for the team purely because of the fact that they didn't have a long-term lease with their city. So he actually inflated the value of the team, but his commitment was to keep the team in Baltimore. He could have very easily moved that team in the early 80s down to Washington, and it would have been a long time after, for Baltimore to get a team. So having said that, Edward Bennett Williams deserves some, posthumous credit for inflating the value of the team and then not selling it and capitalizing on doing it. But what he did, and Larry Lucchino and some others, they formed the Designated Hitters Club. And that club was simply inspired community members, 50, 70, 100 people, who went out and literally solicited season tickets, group sales, different things like that, in an event to show people that the civic pride was there and that the attendance on a nightly basis would be good enough not to move the team.
It almost sounds Pollyanna at this point, though, right? I mean, civic pride and all that, but the football team packed up in Mayflower vans and rolled out of here in the middle of all of that, right?
That's right. So that's the context of what was going on. But the important thing is that those tickets were bought far in advance. Now, whether anybody sat in them or not, and reminder, the attendance numbers that are reported every night in Major League Baseball are tickets sold, not butts in seats. So having said that, that's what you see when you see the low nights, the Monday nights or the Tuesday nights in Tampa, Cleveland, or now Baltimore. The reason why is you're seeing a very thin line of season tickets. It's almost like a receding hairline, right? It's gone back a little bit over the last few years. And the question is, why is that? And I think, again, a lot of it has to do with the relationship that the club and the organization has. There's no question that the Orioles organization, as a charitable and a giving organization, they give a tremendous amount to organizations in the community. The question, though, is really about engagement with corporations. And when you look about the stadium next time you go, look at some of the local organizations and say to yourself, who's here and who's not here? And if they're not represented with a sign or something else, chances are they don't have tickets or they don't have the tickets that they used to. And that's the lifeblood of the Monday through Thursday 4 nights when you're waiting for the weekend to blow it up. So,
but most fans think the lifeblood should be the first place Blue Jays are in town, and I should want to go to the ballpark or be compelled on nice weather nights that the game matters, right? I mean, and I guess in 14 years when you don't play any games that ever matter after opening day, that becomes a more difficult sell that people would walk up, I guess, to use the vernacular, or buy a week or a week ahead of time and circle that Tuesday or Wednesday night and say, I want to see the Blue Jays play because, this is a big game and I care about the team and I'm vested in the team winning a big game and witnessing that and being a part of the magic and rooting them on and how we can help our team and all of that jingo nonsense. But people should want to be out there when the biggest games are being played, I would think, right?
Well, look, what you're talking about, and you're a huge baseball fan, it's in your blood, it's in your history. I spent a good deal of my career in it. But the notion that you can do well enough with the core baseball fans, people that recognize, the Blue Jays are in town or it's the Yankees, whatever, there just isn't enough to get you to a meaningful level. Now, every market is different, and St. Louis is different from Baltimore, and it's different from Detroit. But at the end of the day, that core fan base will only get you so much. People tend to then buy tickets on an individual basis based on the herd or the surge mentality. And I'll take you back to 2012 in the Baltimore market when you saw that there was a surge building. The team had been out of it for so many years, as you've talked about. There was that surge mentality, and you were buying tickets, buying with your friends, buying them with groups. People buy them for entertainment reasons. They buy them for recreational reasons. They buy them for all sorts of social reasons that literally build on top of that foundation that you have as a season ticket base. And what I believe has happened over time in Baltimore is that season ticket base has either meandered around the same amount or it's eroded some in the last several years. Even though the team has been that competitive, you just have to look and see all these other reasons. So in my contributions to Tom Lavero's column, my key point was just that there's been a lot of unsubstantiated attribution to why people wouldn't show up, whether it was the riots or the weather or $5 on their ticket or this and that. Believe me, most of the people, that doesn't really impact them at all because on a football Sunday, there's going to be 70,000 no matter what the ticket prices are, even though they've bumped those tickets in their regular season. So all those, I was just sort of taking down the unsubstantiated sort of innuendo that a lot of the other media and other people have talked about, and it really just has no standing. Really should look at this and say, what is the core of people who have bought tickets for the Orioles? How many is that? How many season tickets have they purchased? And that's not something that you've known in this town for 20-some years, and I don't know, for lack of me, why that's not information that the public should just know, that every year you've renewed 90% of your season tickets if you have. That's a point of pride. And if that brings you to 13 or 14 or 16,000, that's actually pretty good news for people to hear. So I get it. There's a reluctance in the organization to share anything. But the flip side is a lot of that information can help you down the road. But right now, it's sort of like North Korea. We just don't, we throw things out there and we just don't hear anything back.
Well, I mean, and that's the way so which takes us back to Angelos, which is something no one else in the marketplace ever talks about. But you and I talked about his role in signing Chris Davis and holding off on the ticket prices, and then the season books, the renewals come out at, just an unprecedented way. But, I wrote a list of thoughts and I'm going to blog about this a little later in the week for everybody out there following along at WNST.net. Marty Conway, he is the good professor at Georgetown University and a longtime Orioles front office member as well as the Texas Rangers and a bunch of other places. Here are my 10 thoughts. Washington has a baseball team. That's one. Number two, people do have other things to do. It's 2016. It's not 1979 anymore. It ain't cheap, and it certainly ain't as cheap as it used to be in any way. I feel like there's a staleness about the brand that Masson being the real arm that's there to promote it. Just the fact that they don't put their spring training games on television is insane. Number 5 is arrogance, and boy, I could write a book on that, and I think I have, but just in general, the way they've taken people like me and said, F you, you're not a good fan, you're not a real fan, therefore, I mean, you're the kind of fan that, like, wants accountability or something and, like, wants us to answer questions and be honest with you or something. Like, why would we want a fan like you? People like free stuff, so when they give away stuff, people really do come. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to come out for the boy and girl bobblehead and the wicker hat or whatever, but obviously when they gave away those gold statues a couple of years ago, just, incredible giveaways. That Palmer t-shirt that I couldn't get. Bad marketing all the way around and not having good marketing people. Then my next thing was sort of the We Are Family thing that I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, which is just, you Baltimore, you come or else. It says Baltimore, therefore you've got to come if you're a real Baltimore guy. I don't know that works 50 years later. Then there's the whole feeling for me where the Washington-Baltimore thing, where they sort of abandoned Baltimore for a couple decades, and Angelos refused to put Baltimore back on. And then the last thing I have is just sort of the basic human relations and courtesy of things like, even at the bottom of Lavero's thing, saying, I was looking for someone from the organization to stand up and maybe answer a few questions, and no one's ever available to do that. Maybe that goes back to arrogance. But those were sort of 10 little things that I hit on because the baseball isn't broken, right, Marty? I mean, we could sit here and bitch about first-round draft picks or how much money they spend or don't spend. The team doesn't suck, and they really haven't sucked in a long time. So, that part has been fixed. And Adam Jones is a hero, and Manny Machado's a budding. So, they have players, they have a manager. So what else is wrong about it, right? I mean, I guess that's the crux of the whole argument with Lavero is what's wrong? Well, Peter Angelo still owns the place. That's what the hell's wrong with it, right?
Yeah, well, I'll be interested to read what you post. So let me respond to a couple of those things. I'd start by generally saying that at this point, the Orioles are down from last year's attendance by about 225,000 people, right? So over 70 games, that's around 3,000 or so fans a game.
And it sounded awful a couple weeks ago when you called it like 160, but then they have a series where they might have drawn 40,000 a night in the old vernacular, and maybe caught up, right? Because a good year, you start to sort of catch up at the end because you sell more tickets because there's more interest usually, right?
So the point being is where I was going is that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the giveaways, the fireworks, all those things. The proof is that fans are there. I've said before, and you've paraphrased this. They're not. They're not the lost tribes of the Incas. They're not lost in the Amazon. That they're there, but that tells you that 2,000 to 3,000 people a night can really make a difference, and that's 2,000 to 3,000 on a Monday, 2,000 to 3,000 on a Wednesday or Tuesday, or wherever those nights are. So a lot of that loss is distributed widely, which means it's not on the regular fan. Now, does that mean that somebody that used to come 4 times is only coming twice? Well, perhaps, but they're still coming twice. So I would say a couple of other things. The fact that there's baseball and really good competitive baseball in Washington does make a difference for sure, and you should allocate and account for that. However, I would say this. Since the Nationals have been here over 10 years, you can't tell me that the population and the flow around here is the same, because it's not. Baltimore and Washington are still thriving and growing communities in 2 reasons. Number one, people are moving here, and number 2, businesses are starting up and moving here. So there's just as much, if not more, opportunity than there was 10 years ago.
Yeah, this isn't a depressed region against other regions like Las Vegas and places where people are just fleeing, right?
Right. So the notion that, yes, baseball, and yes, there will be some people that will go to Nats games because they like the National League or they become season ticket holders down there or something like that. But it doesn't mean that the market itself hasn't expanded at the same time. So as a competitor, if they put Chick-fil-A across the street from McDonald's, McDonald's says, darn it, I got to work harder to get, what I used to get because I'm going to lose some traffic opportunities to my competitor across the street. And the second one that I would say is this notion that, and again, unsubstantiated, unsupported, that because all of the games are on and because Masson and HD TVs and 4K screens and all that, look, at the end of the day, number one, most of that hasn't changed over 10, 15 years. When I was with the Orioles, we had over 100 games on television, whether it was WMAR, free television, and pay television. That's number one. And number 2, it's happening in Detroit and St. Louis and in Chicago and all those sorts of places. The games are available to people. What does that tell you? Is that the broadcast of the games are a 3-hour commercial for your product, which Procter & Gamble would love to have a 3-hour commercial every night for Crest toothpaste, right? Sales would certainly rise if done properly. So the broadcast of your games are a supplement. They're not a substitute. And it goes to the age-old marketing approach, and that is, if you like what you see here, you're going to like it a heck of a lot better when you come out next Friday or 2 Fridays from now when we play New York, or
Sunday. Yeah, right? Exactly.
So that notion that these things are all – so you look at these things, and I'll be interested to read your list, but when you start to look at those in the context of, the balance of what's happened in the past and the balance of what's happening all around sports and Major League Baseball, most of this just doesn't hold up. It comes down to 2,500 people a night, Monday through Thursday, some other, tough nights where you really earn your stripes when you're out there promoting, pushing, drawing people in. As I said, if this were a National Football League organization and they had all of their games on every night, they would be marketing this like crazy, or the NBA like crazy, to get people out. So some of this is on baseball, some of this is on the Orioles. None of it is on the population of the Baltimore and Washington regions.
I mean, why wouldn't they, on the first night when the place is empty, say, anyone that acts in the next hour, tickets are $8 tomorrow night, buy right now? They probably would sell 2,000 tickets if, in game one they're not losing 5. And I don't know. I mean, I would think that they would care that the seats are empty, but I guess, at the bottom of all of this with Livero and, all these conversations you and I have had till we're orange in the face, quite frankly, Marty, he's making so much money, it just doesn't matter. And he's a different bird in saying, I don't want a foreign car in my building. I don't want a cow on my outfield wall. I don't like the color of the Nations Bank sign in the outfield. I mean, whatever his whim and his will, it really does go back to Peter in all of this. And with Peter, the guy who runs the place isn't really all that embarrassed the place is empty because he's making $80 million whether anybody comes or not, right?
I think it's certainly, look, the truth of the matter is, in every organization, whether it's Ted Leonsis or Dan Snyder or Steve Bisciotti, the owner drives the ethos and the day-to-day. These are just not big businesses. These are 100, 150 people when you don't count the football or the baseball or the basketball players. These are generally small businesses, family-oriented type businesses. So it starts at the top in terms of the ethos and what they want. And again, we've had football here now for a period of time after losing it. We've got baseball down the road. We've got a lot of other things that add to this. But at the end of the day, the market is the market. And I don't think, other than some parts of Baltimore City and some equal in some areas, that you can look at those things and say, well, that's clearly a reason why these are down. It really comes down to the ethos, the engagement with the community, sort of the inspiration, the aspiration. I had the fortune to work for owners and executives like Larry Lucchino or George Bush, who were very aspirational in the way that they approach these things. And when times get tough and you don't win, or the weather's bad, or there's some streak that you come against, generally speaking, you're able to get through it because you have those kind of inspiration and aspirational individuals.
Leadership counts, right? We see that on the field with Buck, but off the field, they're still a last-place organization, really. That's a fact based on what we saw last week.
Well, you can look at the org charts of all Major League Baseball teams, and you can definitely point out some areas that the Orioles are either understaffed or not staffed in terms of season tickets and group sales and other things like that. So there are some areas that you could really look at and come up with some definitive and more substantiated, positions to take. But again, at the end of the day, this really doesn't matter to too many people because, as I've said before, if you don't come to the games, this doesn't matter to you at all. If you do come to the games, you're fine because maybe you get a better seat because there's not 2,500 people there waiting in line or bought before you or whatever it is. So to find the people that this really is concerned with, at the end of the day, handful of people, and maybe that's why issues like this or the massive dispute on TV and things like this get rolled over all the time because the addressable audience is so small for it, perhaps.
Well, and the other part of it is, Baldo Jimenez pitched a complete game on Monday, and they're in the pennant race, and last week was last week, and the attendance is Peter's problem, and rah, shish boom bah, if I do care, they're winning and they're in it. But I think there really is a larger question because you were part of getting that stadium built with the promises that were made for the city, for the community, for the tax base, for the revenue, for the neighborhoods, for all of that stuff. As I've pointed out and as I will point out this week, the headline is, "Hey Orioles, Baltimore just isn't into that. Just isn't that into you." And I guess that's part of it now, and part of it is, well, if they care and if they're embarrassed, then do something about it, right? Make me want to come to the game. That's all.
Yeah, and then once the football here kicks off in a matter of days, that's another storyline to fill and all these other things
distraction
kind of recede to the past, and they become the problem of the GM or the owner or somebody else who wanted or needed the money and needed this or that other thing. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just that's from my experience of this market, working in other markets, working with other baseball executives and sports executives in terms of how they currently embrace the challenges of marketing of season tickets and anything that requires a commitment, especially from millennials who are 18 to 34 and don't want to buy a full record album. They only want to buy one single. So why would they want to buy more than one game out of your 81? So that's the challenge.
He is Marty Conway. He is the good professor at Georgetown University and fresh back from Qatar. And, I saw a World Soccer game last week at Mönchengladbach in Germany. I saw the German national team and Bastille Schweinsteiger's final game and a German. I tell you what, man, there's nothing like going to the pitch in Europe to see the difference in the experience of sports there. And by the way, Marty, I want to give you this because we've talked about the NFL and global domination and a $2.5 billion industry, and it is kickoff week here. People in Germany love the NFL, man. Like, everywhere I went, there was, stuff. And, the kid that saved my wife's life watches the NFL every week. He and his brother go to a bar at 7 o'clock on Sunday nights. The games come on. It's a doubleheader, and they've told me it's a big, big deal. Like, I was in the square. They said any Sunday night you're here, there are 2,000 people watching the NFL on a Sunday night in Germany in a bar district, and that's just in a little town,
Yeah, well, the two countries outside of the United States and Europe that have captured that is England. London is clearly, as you know, they're playing games there. And the other place, even when they had the European League of the NFL, was in Germany. There was a couple of markets in Germany that caught on, and but where they ran short was in Spain and in France and in Scotland and a few other places. Sorry. So they do have a couple of key markets that, again, they're planning. They'd like to play another game in Germany in addition to the 3 in London and Mexico City and Toronto, and so they're trying to figure out a way to capture what they can. But yeah, you saw the difference between a full stadium for the national soccer team, the football team there, and the difference, and it's really all about nationalism and pride and solidarity, and there's no getting around that.
It was a lot of fun, man. I had a great time. Hey, kickoff week here, right? Look at those college football games over the week. Not just the results and, who won and who lost with Notre Dame and with LSU. A lot of teams, places getting their feelings hurt. But, these neutral sites are really something to start a season there, right?
Yep. So Atlanta, we had the Chick-fil-A kickoff classic down there with North Carolina and Georgia, although Georgia's barely a neutral site. We certainly saw that in Jerry World in Arlington, where Alabama and USC drew 100,000 people, and then Florida State playing. Ole Miss on
Correct.
Monday night in Orlando, and another 75 or 80,000 people. So these neutral site, early first weekend, Labor Day type kickoff opportunities, and it makes me think M&T Stadium was vacant as far as I can recollect on Labor Day weekend, and I know the Orioles were playing, and there's a lot of this and that and the other thing, but it seems to me that there's a missed opportunity in the Mid-Atlantic region with terrific weather, and whether it's Maryland or Penn State or West Virginia or anybody else, Virginia Tech, the makeup of the two, It seems like there's a tremendous opportunity there that from time to time the appetite gets whetted, and we'll play Army-Navy there later this year. But it seems like a really interesting opportunity in early September to put 70,000 people in there on a regular basis. But I don't know. It would require corporation to step up and do some sponsorship. It would require some other people that may not have this as a priority on their list. Who knows?
Every time there's been a game here, I mean, I live downtown, it's been a BFD. Whether it's Navy, whether it's Ohio State. I mean, you know, the traveling fans are there, and Dallas felt it, Lambeau Field felt it, and certainly USC felt their feelings getting hurt over the weekend as well.
Yeah, and this coming weekend, there's something new for college football. Virginia Tech's going to play Tennessee in the middle of a NASCAR racetrack in Bristol, Tennessee. They're going to put turf down and lights and everything, and they presumably are going to draw 100 and 125,000 people into the NASCAR seats to do it there. So these kind of creative way to address the event, the market, is what stimulates interest in your sport or in your school in this particular case. And there's a lot of creativity out there if people are just open to it and willing to think hard about it.
You thought it all ended with Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King, didn't you?
I sure did, and apparently I was wrong.
Hey, Marty, it's great having you on, man. Great to catch up with you. Happy New Year to you and all football fans out there. And, hey, Springsteen's in town again, so life is good around here, man.
It really is, at least till the 14th of September, and then when he goes on hiatus.
I drive all night just to buy you some shoes, man. See you later, Marty Conway. There he goes, the good professor. You can follow him on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Marty Conway. He is the professor at Georgetown University and our unofficial professor of all business-related activities here at WNST.net. I'm fresh back from Deutschland. All the videos are up at Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram. You can always email me, nasty at WNST.net. Lots of news on the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, each and every morning, our WNST morning newspaper hits your email inbox. That's free of charge and powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And don't forget, you can listen anytime, your way, where you want, when you want, even in Germany. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for you 24 hours a day. You can download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear anywhere you are. It is the buyatoyota.com audio vault. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Radio here this week and back from Deutschland. I appreciate all of the love and goodwill out on our Facebook and Twitter and social media, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We did it all from over in Germany last week.